Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When I built my dream home with a private pool oasis, I never imagined the real threat wouldn't be hurricanes, but the neighbor next door. It started with small talk and ended with trespassing, lawsuits, and a battle for peace. Welcome to suburban warfare. 3 years ago, I stood on a patch of freshly leveled dirt in coastal Florida, staring at the frame of what would become my dream home. I'd spent over a decade designing homes for other people, so when the time came to build my own, I didn't cut corners. Every tile, beam, and bolt had a purpose. The heart of the property, though, wasn't the modern architecture or the clean solar roofing. It was the backyard. A 6-foot privacy fence wrapped around a custom-built pool with a waterfall feature, an in-ground hot tub, a shaded grilling area, and a space for my kids to run barefoot until they collapsed in lounge chairs with popsicles melting down their fingers. This wasn't just a yard, it was a sanctuary. My wife Carla and I moved in with our 2 kids, Ellie, 8, and Marcus, 11, and for a while, everything was as perfect as a man like me could dare to hope. Quiet mornings with espresso on the terrace, pool parties with a couple of close friends, late-night barbecues under soft patio lights. The fence wasn't just for privacy. It was a requirement from our insurance provider. Liability coverage for a pool of that size mandated a minimum 6-foot enclosure with locking gates. No exceptions, no open-door policy. About a year after we settled in, the house next door sold. The previous owner had been a retired dentist who kept to himself, watered his roses with military discipline, and waved once a week. In his place arrived Brad Hammond, a self-proclaimed people person with a volume knob stuck on 11. On move-in day, he came over shirtless, sweaty, and grinning with 2 cases of beer and an unspoken assumption that we'd become fast friends. His girlfriend Tiffany followed behind, wrangling 3 kids, and a Bluetooth speaker blasting country pop like it owed her money. "Man, this place is gorgeous," Brad said, peering over my back fence during one of our early conversations. "You design it yourself?" I nodded, trying not to sound smug. "I'm an architect." He let out a low whistle. "You must be doing all right. That pool? Damn. Looks like a damn resort back there." He smiled when he said it, but something in his eyes lingered a beat too long, like a stray dog casing a butcher shop. Over the next few weeks, Brad made small talk every time we crossed paths. Overly familiar stuff about beer brands, his ex-wife, how HOA rules were for suckers, and how he'd tried to put in a pool, but his lot was just a postage stamp with plumbing. He'd laugh, slap my shoulder a little too hard, and say things like, "One day I'll crash your place. Save me from that kiddie pool I got off Amazon." I'd chuckle politely, but never invited him in. Boundaries, after all. Then came the comments that started out playful but got sticky. "My kids are going nuts seeing that pool, man," he said once, leaning over the fence while I grilled steaks. "They keep asking why we don't have one. Told them we might borrow yours one weekend." I smiled tightly. "It's not really open for borrowing. Insurance and all that." He nodded, took a sip of his drink, and said, Yeah, of course. Just saying. Shame to have such a nice pool and not spread the love, you know? Another time, as the kids were splashing in the deep end and Carla read on the deck, he stood at the edge of his yard and said, "Man, you've got the life." "My crew would kill for a day in that water." Carla raised an eyebrow at me when I came back inside. "Did he just say, 'my crew'?" I shrugged. Apparently. He stopped by unannounced more than once, knocking with some vague pretext, borrowing hedge clippers, asking if I knew a good mechanic, dropping off flyers for his used car lot. But each visit ended with him making a comment about the pool, a suggestion, a joke, an implication. It stopped being neighborly and started feeling like sales pressure. I began avoiding long conversations, especially when I noticed Tiffany starting to comment too. Once, during a brief sidewalk chat with Carla, she said with a fake laugh lilt, "Your kids are so lucky. My poor babies are stuck with sprinkler games and garden hose fights. You guys should totally do a play date. A little swim date." Carla smiled politely and steered the conversation toward weather, then abruptly ended it with, "Well, gotta run." I won't lie, I was getting twitchy, but they hadn't done anything technically wrong. No trespassing. No threats, just a neighborly friendliness that was beginning to feel a few degrees off from normal. Still, I gave them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they were just socially clumsy. Maybe they were testing boundaries to see if I'd crack and offer an invite, but I wouldn't. This was my space, my family's. I'd worked too hard for it to turn into a community pool just because someone with poor impulse control decided the grass was greener. The final straw in that first chapter came one late Sunday evening. The kids had gone inside. Carla and I sat on the terrace sipping wine, the pool lights casting that soft turquoise shimmer across the water, peaceful until Brad's voice drifted over the fence like a crow on an updraft. "You ever think about opening it up, Mercer?" he asked, invisible behind the wooden slats. "You know, for the neighbors? Could be a real nice community gesture." Carla leaned over and whispered, "Is he serious?" I didn't answer. I just stared out across the pool, jaw clenched, watching the water ripple beneath the LED glow, and felt something twist in my gut. I had a bad feeling. Saturday mornings in our house were sacred. Pancakes, fresh coffee, no rush. Carla read the news on her tablet, Ellie colored at the patio table, and Marcus plotted elaborate Nerf ambushes that I pretended not to notice. I was halfway through flipping a blueberry pancake when I heard it. A sharp, deliberate knock on the back gate. Not the front door, not the doorbell. The back gate, the one that faced the pool. I paused, spatula midair, and exchanged a glance with Carla. "Seriously," she muttered, setting her tablet down. I walked out onto the deck. The gate rattled again, followed by Brad's unmistakable voice. "Yo, Ethan! You around?" I approached slowly. He was standing outside the gate in gym shorts and flip-flops, holding a white folder in one hand and a travel mug in the other. His sunglasses sat cockeyed on his forehead like a gas station action figure. "Morning," I said, unlatching the gate halfway but not opening it fully. "Everything okay?" "Better than okay," he said, stepping forward with a grin like he was about to pitch me a timeshare. "I got something for you to look over." He handed me the folder. Inside was a typed document, stapled, highlighted, and entirely too formal. The title made me choke on air. "Neighborhood Shared Pool Agreement." I scanned the first few lines and had to blink twice. According to the agreement, Brad and his family would have non-exclusive recreational access to our backyard pool on Saturdays and Sundays from 12 p.m. to 6 p.m. In exchange, they would maintain cordial neighborhood relations and agree to not request additional usage beyond specified hours. There was even a signature line for me, with a pre-printed date. Brad. I stared at the page. "Is this a joke?" He tilted his head. "Nah, man, I'm dead serious. I figured this was the easiest way to make it fair for everyone. You know, with you having the only pool and all, just weekends. That's all we're asking." I closed the folder and handed it back. "No." "No?" His face twitched, like he hadn't computed the possibility. "No, Brad, it's private property. Insurance doesn't cover guests I don't explicitly authorize. And I'm not signing anything that gives someone regular access to my home. That's a lawsuit waiting to happen." He laughed, dry and sharp. "Man, you architects, always so uptight about legal crap. I'm not asking for a damn lease. I'm just trying to be neighborly here. It's hot as hell. Our kids are roasting, and you've got a damn water park back there." I kept my tone calm. "I understand, but this isn't happening. The pool is for our family, period. And the fence isn't coming down either, before you ask." His smile vanished. "So you're really not going to share? You're just going to hog that oasis back there while the rest of us cook?" "This isn't a communal campsite, Brad. It's my backyard." He shook his head, stepping back like I'd insulted his mother. "You think you're better than us? That it? You think because you've got a waterfall and a fancy-ass grill setup that you're some king of the cul-de-sac?" "I think I've earned what I built, and I respect boundaries," he snorted. "Respect, right. Real neighborly of you, Mercer. I come over here with an offer, and you spit in my face." Carla's voice rang out from the deck. "You done yelling at my husband now?" Brad turned toward her but didn't answer. He just gave me a look, something between smug and menacing, then walked back toward his house. Halfway across the lawn, he called out over his shoulder, "I tried to do this the easy way." Don't say I didn't. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't going away. The following week was like living next to a frat house with boundary issues. Every evening, Brad blasted music from massive outdoor speakers, aimed conveniently at our yard. Not fun party music, weaponized noise, bass-heavy EDM and screeching pop covers, usually starting around 6 p.m. and ending just as our kids were heading to bed. One night, he actually played the same Pitbull song on loop for 2 hours. I knew this because Carla timed it. His kids, 3 chaotic little whirlwinds, started launching balls over our fence daily. Footballs, basketballs, one time a rubber chicken that somehow made it into our pool filter. Every time, Brad would saunter over to the front door like he was collecting Amazon packages. "Hey buddy, mind tossing that back over?" At first I did. I didn't want to drag the kids into it. But then it started happening 5, 6, 7 times a day. One afternoon I opened the gate, handed the ball back, and said, "Brad, this can't keep happening." He shrugged. "They're just kids. Maybe if they had somewhere to play, like a pool, they wouldn't be bored." Tiffany started chiming in online. She wasn't subtle. Her Facebook feed suddenly included vague rants like, "Some people have everything and still can't share a damn thing." Or as either selfish or your bad neighbors. I didn't follow her, but Carla did. The posts piled up. Passive-aggressive shots aimed directly at us, but written in that coward's third-person voice. Then came the official complaints. First, a letter from the city about our fence. Someone had filed a report claiming it was higher than local code allowed. An inspector came out. He measured, made a note on his tablet, and said, 6 feet. All legal. Sorry for the hassle. Then another complaint, this time about excessive pool noise after hours. The irony burned. The pool had a built-in filtration system and subtle waterfall, which made less noise than Brad's lawnmower. But policy was policy. So another inspector came. He listened for all of 5 minutes before apologizing for wasting our time. At dinner that night, Carla leaned over her plate. "He's trying to wear us down." "Let him try," I said, pouring myself a glass of wine. "I'll go 10 rounds before I cave to that clown." Still, I wasn't blind. I saw the pattern. Isolation, agitation, escalation. I had built a fortress for peace, but someone next door was laying siege, one passive-aggressive tactic at a time. So I did what architects do best. I started planning. It happened on a Wednesday. Work had been hell that week. Back-to-back client meetings, 2 project deadlines, and a contractor in Tampa who somehow managed to install mirrored windows inside out. I was halfway through a Zoom call when I saw the security alert on my phone. Motion detected. Backyard camera. I ignored it. Probably a squirrel, maybe a raccoon. We'd had both. 10 minutes later, another ping. Then another. I muted my mic, checked the live feed, and nearly dropped my phone. Brad. Brad was in my backyard. He was climbing over the fence like it was part of an obstacle course, using the barbecue countertop for balance. He landed with a grunt, then waved toward the fence. Seconds later, Tiffany climbed up awkwardly in flip-flops, cursing as she straddled the top like she was auditioning for America's least coordinated criminals. She made it over, barely, and turned to help the kids. 3 of them. They passed over towels, a speaker, a bag of snacks, and something I swear was a box of popsicles. The youngest one just straight up cannonballed into the deep end before his shirt was even off. I stared at the screen, dumbfounded. No text, no call, no knock. Just full-blown trespassing in broad daylight, like they own the place. Brad dragged a lounge chair closer to the pool, cracked open my outdoor fridge, and pulled out a bottle of beer. My beer, and held it up like he'd just won a fishing tournament. Tiffany kicked off her sandals, pulled a drink from her purse, and settled in like she was poolside at the Hilton. My mouth was dry. I glanced at the time. Carla was at her office. The kids were at school. I was too far into my meeting to ditch without raising suspicion, and part of me just sat there, stunned, watching this surreal suburban invasion unfold like a live broadcast from Idiot Island. 3 hours. That's how long they stayed. They swam. They laughed. Tiffany took selfies with some obnoxious dog ear filter. Brad sang along to his Bluetooth speaker while flipping burgers on my grill using my tongs. One of the kids used Marcus's floaty without asking. Another found the stash of pool noodles and threw them like javelins at the fence. At one point, Brad opened the second fridge drawer and pulled out the flank steak I had marinating for Friday night. My Friday night. He put it on the grill like it was his goddamn tailgate. They left 30 minutes before school pickup. Just packed up, scaled the fence again, easier on the exit apparently, and vanished back to their property like nothing had happened. Like it had all been normal. By the time Carla got home, I was pacing the kitchen. I didn't say anything at first, just handed her my phone with the video queued up. She watched, then again, then turned to me slowly. "They stole your beer," she said flatly. And the flank steak, I added. Her face went blank. Okay, war it is. That night, I pulled the footage from every angle. The front yard camera caught them slipping around the side and climbing in. The backyard camera had it all in perfect quality. Date, time, everything. I saved the files in 3 separate folders and emailed them to myself, my cloud account, and Carla, just in case. The next evening, I walked over to Brad's house. Carla wanted to come, but I told her no. I didn't want this turning into a screaming match. I just wanted the facts, clean and simple. Brad answered the door in sweatpants and a tank top, holding a bowl of cereal like a college freshman. "Oh, hey, Mercer, what's up?" I held up my phone. "You know exactly what's up." He looked at the screen, where the video showed him hoisting a kid over my fence. He watched for 5 seconds, then shrugged. Man, it was a hot day. "We just needed to cool off. No harm, no foul. You broke into my yard. You used my pool, my food, my grill. That's trespassing, theft, and if something had gone wrong, God forbid one of your kids got hurt, I'd be the one facing liability." "Don't be dramatic," he said, waving me off. "We were careful. It's not like we trashed the place. You climbed a locked fence, Brad." He rolled his eyes. "You've been such a tight ass lately, man. I figured if you weren't going to loosen up, I'd just take initiative. Life's too short to be territorial about chlorine." I blinked. "Are you proud of this?" He smiled. "Look, you got a sweet setup. We just borrowed it for a bit. You're acting like we committed armed robbery. You crossed the line. This is your last warning. If you or anyone from your house sets foot in my yard again, I'm pressing charges. No conversation. No warning." He smirked. "You threatening me? You know Tiffany's got ears like a bat. She's hearing all of this." From inside the house, I heard Tiffany shout, "He said he's threatening us." I just turned and walked away. I heard Brad say, under his breath, "Some people just don't know how to be neighbors." When I got home, Carla had already printed no trespassing signs and was browsing new locks for the gate. She looked up, stone-faced. "Do I need to buy motion-activated sprinklers?" I didn't answer, but I didn't say no either. We left the house Saturday morning around 10. Ellie had ballet practice, Marcus had soccer, and Carla's sister was hosting a late lunch an hour up the coast. It wasn't supposed to be an overnight thing, just a long day of family noise, lukewarm casseroles, and forced smiles over paper plates. Before we pulled out of the driveway, I checked the cameras. Habit at this point. Everything looked calm. No movement in the yard. Brad's house was quiet. No sign of a backyard mutiny brewing. Just sun, still air, and a full tank of gas. We were gone 9 hours. When we got home, the driveway was crawling with blue and red lights. 2 cruisers, 1 ambulance, a knot of neighbors in lawn chairs across the street, watching like it was cable news. I hadn't even turned off the ignition before a uniformed officer approached the car. "Mr. Mercer?" he asked. I stepped out slowly. "Yeah, what's going on?" "There was an incident on your property earlier today. Paramedics were called around 3 p.m. Carla opened her door but didn't get out. "What kind of incident?" The officer glanced at his clipboard. "Injury involving a minor. Head trauma. Child slipped and struck their head on the edge of your pool. It was like my stomach turned inside out. I wasn't home," I said quickly. "None of us were. Nobody was supposed to be here." The officer nodded. "That's what we're trying to figure out. Mr. Hammond said he had permission to use the pool." I laughed. It came out hard, fast, and bitter. "Excuse me. He claims you gave verbal consent last week." "That is a lie. A documented, recorded, absolute lie." I pulled out my phone and opened the security feed. I hadn't even reviewed it yet. I just knew the motion alerts had piled up while I was at Carla's sister's place. But the footage was there, crystal clear. Brad and Tiffany, again, climbing the fence, again. But this time, they weren't alone. 4 other adults, 6 kids. They'd thrown a goddamn pool party in my backyard. Coolers, towels, folding chairs, music. One of them brought a foldable shade tent. Another had a karaoke mic. The audacity of it was surreal. A full backyard invasion in broad daylight, like my property was some kind of neighborhood Airbnb. The footage showed Brad and his friends climbing the fence again, this time bringing even more people. They had turned my backyard into a full-blown pool party. At one point, one of the children ran near the pool, slipped, and got injured. Panic broke out. Emergency services were called, and everything spiraled out of control within minutes. Paramedics arrived 4 minutes later. The footage caught Tiffany shrieking into her phone, Brad waving frantically toward the gate, one of the other guests holding a towel to the kid's head. "I have no relationship with those people," I said, voice sharp. "I didn't authorize any of them to be here. You can check every video, every camera, and Brad's been explicitly warned, twice. It's all documented." The officer gave me a slow nod. "Then we'll need to collect your footage. And I suggest contacting your attorney." I didn't sleep that night. Carla sat up with me in the kitchen, her laptop open, reviewing local trespassing laws and liability statutes while I sorted through video files, labeling and backing them up like evidence in a criminal trial. It felt criminal, because it was. Sunday morning, I got a call from my insurance agent. Apparently, Brad had already contacted them, my insurance provider, to report an incident involving an invited guest. I shut that down in 15 seconds flat. "No one was invited," I said. "This was a forced entry. I have footage, witnesses, prior warnings, and I will not be held liable." But that was just the beginning. By noon, I'd been served. A process server showed up at my door with a manila envelope and an attitude. Inside, a notice of intent to sue. The parents of the injured boy, friends of Brad and Tiffany, were filing for $300,000 in damages. Claim: unsafe conditions on the property, lack of appropriate signage, failure to secure access to an attractive nuisance. An attractive nuisance. They were calling my pool a trap, like I'd left candy on a bear trap and dared kids to step on it. I called my attorney. She asked 2 questions. "Do you have video of the trespassing?" "Yes." "Have you ever given verbal or written permission to Brad Hammond to use your property?" "Hell no." She sighed. "Then we're not just going to fight this. We're going to turn it around." The lawsuit was official, $300,000. Medical expenses, pain and suffering, negligence, reckless endangerment of minors. The wording made it sound like I'd left bear traps in the shallow end and sharpened the diving board into a spear. My attorney, Rachel, was calm. Too calm. She asked for every file I had. Security footage, text messages, emails, even Brad's stupid pool sharing agreement that I never signed. She said we had a strong defense. But I still felt like a guy tied to train tracks, watching the locomotive creep closer in slow motion, and then Brad made it worse. He didn't lay low. He didn't retreat into shame or lawyer up quietly. No, he went on the offensive like a middle-aged influencer with a victim complex. He started a group chat called Community Fairness Initiative, added half the neighbors, and framed it as a grassroots movement. "We need to stop selfish property owners from ruining the spirit of this neighborhood." Carla showed me the screenshots. "He's mobilizing idiots," she muttered. The messages were manipulative as hell. Brad claimed that I'd tricked the injured kid's parents, that I refused to contribute to community cohesion, that my fence was symbolic of division in the neighborhood. His buzzwords reeked of desperation and Facebook conspiracy groups. He followed up with printed flyers dropped in mailboxes. "Do you feel excluded, forgotten, while others enjoy luxury behind tall fences?" It was like he watched Les Miserables once and thought he was leading a revolution. To my dismay, a few neighbors initially bit. Not all, maybe 4 or 5, but enough to make us uncomfortable. One of them, a guy named Dean, stopped talking to me at the mailbox. Another posted a vague status online about wealth not buying humanity. Tiffany, meanwhile, cranked up the social media slander. One post read, "You think you know your neighbors until someone chooses lawsuits over compassion." Sir, greed has a face. Carla laughed when she saw that. What's she gonna hashtag next? Trespass for justice. But the damage was starting to show. Marcus came home from school one day and said, Tommy's mom told him he shouldn't swim at our house because we're selfish. Ellie asked if we were going to jail. I wanted to throttle Brad, legally of course. Meanwhile, Rachel filed the first motion in court to dismiss the claim. We presented the footage, Brad and company climbing the fence, setting up camp, using my property like a goddamn resort. She included timestamps, audio clips, copies of the unsigned agreement, and even screen grabs of Tiffany's posts. And still, the other side didn't back off. Instead, their attorney doubled down. Your client created an attractive environment, then failed to secure it against public access. That pissed Rachel off. Your public didn't have permission, Brad, she growled during a preliminary hearing. The judge, to his credit, was skeptical. He asked for a full evidentiary review before moving forward, and that's when the cracks in Brad's armor started to show. A neighbor, Jenna, from 2 doors down, quietly called me one evening. "I think you should know something," she said. Apparently, Brad had been door knocking, telling neighbors that I was planning to turn the neighborhood into a gated community, that I hated kids, that I was reporting people to the city for having inflatable pools. None of it was true, obviously. But the intent was now clear. Brad was trying to poison the well. Jenna added, "Honestly, it reminds me of what he did in his last neighborhood." I blinked. Wait, what? He lived in Clearwater before this. My cousin's HOA was there. Brad tried to sue them over pool rules. Same nonsense. Said he had verbal permission to use the clubhouse pool, then blamed them when someone got hurt at his party. It got messy. My heart rate spiked. "Would your cousin be willing to talk to my attorney?" Already texted her. By the next morning, Rachel had a new witness on our list, a former neighbor who dealt with Brad's entitled insanity before. And this time, there were documents, complaint letters, HOA minutes, even a cease and desist he'd received back in Clearwater for similar behavior. We were no longer just fighting a bad neighbor. We were dealing with a pattern. Rachel smiled when I told her. "He's done this before." Perfect. Judges love patterns. The courtroom wasn't how I imagined it. No gavel pounding, no dramatic objections. Just beige walls, the soft hum of stale air conditioning, and a judge with half-moon glasses perched so low on her nose I kept wondering how they didn't fall off. It had been 4 months since the second invasion. 4 months of depositions, hearings, back-and-forth filings, and more legal jargon than I ever cared to learn. My attorney, Rachel, handled it like a seasoned assassin, calm, surgical, efficient. I just kept my head down, followed instructions, and tried not to have a rage stroke every time Brad's name came up. He arrived wearing a navy blazer 2 sizes too tight and a face full of smug. Tiffany was glued to his arm like a real estate sign, her lips pressed so tightly they practically vanished. The injured kid's parents sat on the other side of the aisle, looking uncomfortable. Their lawyer whispered to them constantly, flipping pages, pointing at exhibits. They didn't look at me once. Rachel opened with the footage, the second invasion. No sound at first, just the visual. Brad climbing the locked fence, waving people in like a deranged maitre d', kids swarming the pool, adults drinking on my deck. Then the injury, the blood, the chaos. A nurse in the courtroom actually winced. Then came the audio clips. The recording of Brad's voice, loud and clear, bragging. I figured if he wasn't going to share, I'd just take initiative. Then, my warning. If you or anyone sets foot in my yard again, I'm pressing charges. Rachel paused the video. "This was recorded 5 days before the incident in question," she said, staring directly at the judge. Brad's attorney objected, something about context, but the judge waved it off. The parent's lawyer tried to argue that the child didn't know it was private property, that Brad had claimed the space was shared, that there was no signage. Rachel flipped to the next page in her binder like she was dealing cards in Vegas. "Your Honor, here's the original pool sharing agreement Brad drafted and handed to my client. Note, never signed, never agreed to, never legally valid." She let it hang there. And just for good measure, here are the surveillance camera signs mounted on every corner of the fence, the locked gate, and a photo of the private property notice at the entrance. The parent's lawyer looked like he'd swallowed a rock. Brad still sat like he thought he had an ace up his sleeve. He didn't, because then Rachel called our witness. Her name was Patrice Dalton, mid-50s, smart suit, clear voice, a former HOA board member from Clearwater, Florida. She took the stand and looked Brad dead in the eyes. "Mr. Hammond lived in our community for 11 months, she said. During that time, he attempted to claim access to our private clubhouse pool. When denied, he hosted unauthorized gatherings, one of which ended in a child's injury. He attempted to file a claim against the HOA. It was dismissed. She held up a copy of the cease and desist order they served him before he moved away. The judge raised her eyebrows slightly. That was the moment I knew the tide had turned. Brad tried to bluster during cross-examination, said she was lying, said he was the victim, that the community hated him because he didn't kiss HOA ass. But by then, the air had shifted. The courtroom no longer felt like neutral ground. It felt like Judgment Day. The next day, a few of the neighbors who had once cozied up to Brad showed up, not to support him, but to testify that he had manipulated them. Jenna, Dean, even old Ron, the grumpy Vietnam vet across the street. "He told us Mercer had given him a key," Dean said. Said they were friends. Said he was allowed. The judge leaned forward. Did Mr. Mercer ever confirm that? No, and once I saw the footage, I realized we'd been lied to. That sealed it. When the judge finally spoke, her words were like a guillotine, precise, final, and irreversible. The plaintiffs failed to establish legal access or negligence. The defendant made every reasonable effort to secure his property. The claim is dismissed with prejudice. Then she turned to Brad. Mr. Hammond, it is clear from testimony and evidence that you not only trespassed, but did so knowingly, repeatedly, and with disregard for safety or legal boundaries. Brad opened his mouth, but she cut him off. Sir, do not interrupt me. Then she turned to Rachel. You may proceed with your counterclaim. The courtroom was silent except for the shuffle of papers and the occasional click of Rachel's pen. Brad sat like a statue, jaw tight, eyes forward, lips pressed so hard they'd gone pale. Tiffany stared at the floor. The injured kid's parents had already left, avoiding eye contact on their way out, their attorney quietly mumbling something about miscommunication and withdrawal of further action. The judge looked at Rachel. Proceed. And Rachel did. Like a damn sledgehammer. Your Honor, we are filing a civil counterclaim against Mr. Hammond on behalf of my client, Mr. Ethan Mercer, for the following: unlawful trespass, repeated violation of private property boundaries, theft and consumption of property, harassment, defamation of character, and orchestrating an unauthorized event which directly led to a child's injury and a false liability claim. She paused. Let it sink in. Additionally, we are introducing evidence that shows Mr. Hammond engaged in a pattern of this behavior at a prior residence, creating a documented history of disregard for property law. The judge nodded slowly. Let's hear the damages. Rachel listed them like a grocery receipt from hell: replacement of stolen damaged goods, grill utensils, food, alcohol, emergency cleanup and restoration of pool and deck, legal fees, emotional distress, online defamation, and reputational harm within the community, the cost of increased home insurance after the false claim. And then she pulled out the final exhibit, a screenshot from Tiffany's social media, dated 2 days after the second trespass. It read, "Some people get what they deserve. Maybe next time he'll learn to share. E karma gets you, Doriseches community matters." The judge sighed. Mr. Hammond, she said, tone suddenly sharp, you have demonstrated a stunning lack of respect, not just for your neighbor's property, but for the legal system itself. You lied under oath, you organized trespass under false pretenses, and you defamed a man whose only mistake was not giving in to your entitlement. She turned back to Rachel. Claim awarded in full, $45,000 in damages to Mr. Mercer. Brad opened his mouth, eyes wide. I can't pay that. That is a separate problem, Mr. Hammond. Then came the final blow. The judge noted that the criminal charges were outside her jurisdiction, but that based on the evidence submitted, she was formally recommending prosecution for multiple counts of trespass under Florida statute and contributing to the delinquency of a minor. Later that week, we received confirmation from the state attorney's office. Brad was being charged with 2 counts of criminal trespassing, both misdemeanors, and 1 count of organizing a gathering on private property without consent. The plea deal offered 1 year probation, 200 hours of community service, and mandatory property law education. If he refused, trial. He took the deal. His smugness drained fast after that. Word spread quickly in the neighborhood. Those Fairness Coalition flyers stopped appearing in mailboxes. His Bluetooth speakers, silent. The kids weren't seen outside for weeks. Tiffany deleted half her social media. The hashtag karma post was gone, replaced with vacation memes and detox smoothie recipes. And then the for sale sign appeared. Not a nice one, not a premium agency, just a cheap corrugated plastic sign with fading ink, stuck lopsided in the dry patch of his lawn. One day, as I watered the hydrangeas, Brad walked out to his car, avoiding eye contact. His face looked smaller, somehow. Thinner. Defeated. He muttered, "Lawyer says we're settling the civil part. Payment plan." I didn't answer. He added, "Didn't think it'd get this far." I met his eyes for the first time in weeks. "I warned you," I said. Then I turned on the sprinkler. Brad moved out on a rainy Thursday afternoon. Not dramatic, no shouting, no midnight packing, just a soggy rental truck, a couple of worn-out plastic bins, and a tired silence hanging over the cul-de-sac like morning fog. He didn't say goodbye. Didn't knock. Tiffany loaded the back seat in yoga pants and a hoodie, her kids standing quietly by the curb, tapping on their phones like this wasn't just the end of one home, but the start of another long, humiliating reset. The house sat empty for weeks. The lawn dried out, flyers piled up on the porch. At one point, someone took the "for sale" sign and bent it in half. No one bothered to fix it. It was like the neighborhood itself had decided to erase Brad from memory, bleach him out like a wine stain on white carpet. When the sale finally went through, Carla watched through the blinds like a crime scene analyst. The buyers were an older couple, late 60s, maybe early 70s, quiet, reserved. The kind of people who still waved when you passed, still wrote paper checks for property tax, still baked things with actual butter. First week after moving in, they left us a note in the mailbox. "Hello, we're the Wainwrights, looking forward to peaceful times. Please forgive the state of the fence on our side. We'll be replacing it ASAP." I chuckled when I read it. Carla made them a blueberry pie. The gate stayed locked, always. I added another deadbolt. The security system got an upgrade. Full perimeter, AI detection, cloud redundancy. I even mounted 2 extra cameras at the corners just in case anyone else got creative. Maybe it was overkill. I didn't care. And yes, I raised the fence to 8 feet, right to the legal limit. Pressure-treated wood, thick vertical planks, sealed, reinforced posts, and a motion-activated floodlight mounted above the back gate, topped with coil wire. Legal, defensive, beautiful. I installed a sign, "Private property." Video surveillance around the clock. Trespassers will be prosecuted. Right below that, "Smile. This isn't a community pool." The kids noticed. Marcus laughed. Ellie asked what trespassers meant. Carla rolled her eyes but didn't object. She knew what I knew. The peace we had now wasn't luck. It was earned. One Saturday morning, a week after the Wainwrights moved in, I grilled some steaks. Marcus was in the pool. Ellie was building a domino tower on the patio table. Carla came out with 2 glasses of wine and a smirk. "You're awfully calm today," she said. "No lawsuits, no EDM, no children hurling rubber chickens into the yard," I said. "Feels good." She nodded toward the neighbor's yard. "Think we should invite the Wainwrights over sometime?" I sipped my wine. "Maybe, after a background check." She snorted. "You're never letting this go, are you?" "Letting it go?" I had a man climb my fence, drink my beer, host a pool party, and sue me for getting caught. "Fair," she said, and leaned back in the chair. "Still, it's over." It was. But I learned something. You can build the perfect home. The dream backyard, the tranquil escape. But peace isn't just something you design. You have to protect it. Vigorously. And if anyone ever tells you neighbors should share while standing on your deck, drinking your beer, and letting their kids use your pool, they're not your neighbor. They're the problem.